France has because of how France developed as a nation, it has a far stronger like I don't know if it's union culture or stronger worker protection. Generally, France through the Industrial Revolution, it didn't do the big factories like the US and the UK did. They stayed more small and mid-sized businesses, and this gave workers more power. And so throughout the whole history of France, workers have had more influence. They've used that influence to create a very strong pension system for their retirement. Like they get to retire young, and they get a good amount of money from it too. And it is causing, from my understanding, huge issues. Like everyone is in the world as people get older, they're raising the retirement age to kind of reflect that. France has not been able to do this because of the strong worker protections, and you've probably seen on the news there'll be a huge protest in France because they try and raise the retirement age by like 2 years or something, and all of a sudden their whole society freaks out because so much of it is built off that strong pension system, and it appears to be like bankrupting the country, from my understanding. Let's have a watch.
France has not been having a great time lately. It's been almost 2 years to the day since we last looked at its economy, and within that time, what was already a country going through some dramatic changes has clearly become even more turbulent. Within just that time since our last update, they have been through 5 different prime ministers, a clear sign of deep...
Wait. 5 in 2 years? Whoa.
Political uncertainty. Now, there are a variety of factors contributing to the ministers' musical chairs and some fringe issues to go beyond purely economics, but at the heart of this all is the simple fact that the French economy is stuck between several rocks and several hard places. The economy has not seen sustained growth for almost 2 decades now, which by itself is not ideal, but...
Okay, I love charts. France GDP per capita. GDP per capita. Okay. Down. Up a little bit, up a little bit, down, up a little bit, up a little bit. So from 2008 to 2024, their GDP per capita basically the same. Like, that's not good. You really want to see that going up.
But it's also not inherently devastating. France has historically prided itself on its egalitarian culture, strong social safety net, robust workers' rights, and overall very high standard of living. Most countries in the world by comparison...
Standard of living. I like these.
Overall very high.
Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, Denmark. I mean, like, these are all the countries at the top of the happiness index, right?
High standard of living.
I want to see Canada, but I don't.
Most countries...
Oh, Canada. 16.
Countries in the world by comparison would be blessed to freeze at this level of prosperity. The problem really is that this isn't sustainable stagnation. Every year the country grows older, putting a larger nominal burden on those famously generous retirement.
I mean, like this is happening all over the world, right? The average age of people in most developed countries is going way up. That's just that adds a lot of pressure.
Programs.
It does.
Debt has been creeping up pretty consistently to fill in the gap, but that can't go on forever.
Again, when we look at these numbers,
retirement programs.
Let's have a look at this again.
Debt has been creeping.
Ratio of national debt to GDP. So let me look up the net debt. What is France's net debt to GDP ratio? because net debt is the one you really want to look at, because it takes their assets, subtracts it from their debt. Oh. 108.4% net public debt. The general rule is anything above 70 starts to have significant downward pressure on growth. So they're over that by a ways. Okay, that's not good. That is not good.
Up pretty consistently to fill in the gap, but that can't go on forever. The country could tax young workers more to fund these problems, but they...
No, you can't. Like, the unhappiness. How's France doing in that? How do I ask this? Where is France in the happiness index? Where is France's youth specifically? See, are they going through the same problem that we got here in Canada and the US? Let's have look. Okay, in the World Happiness Reports, France is currently ranked 35th. So they're 10 points behind us, so our score is very similar. While France has historically hovered around 20 to 30, report highlights a specific and worrying divergence in happiness between generations, particularly in Western Europe. Okay, overall, the trend, the youth crisis in France. I mean, the fact that it's calling it the youth crisis is not good. 2026 report is unique because it focuses heavily on the happiness gap between the young, under 30, and the old, over 60. Regional decline. France is part of the Western European group where youth well-being has fallen. Gender divergence. The report notes a particularly sharp decline for young women in Western Europe. Life satisfaction for girls/young women in the region fell by nearly 1 full point. I want their number. Give me stats. Comparison, young versus old. In a striking shift, if the index only ranked people over the age of 60, France would rank significantly higher. Conversely, the under 30 demographic in France is experiencing a happiness deficit. Policy response. Oh, not much. Aren't you? Happiness index by country. I'm gonna find it. Does this give me the above? I don't see that. World happiness by country. I want to look at specifically the youth. Am I not gonna be able to find it? That sucks. Happiness among youth, top 10 countries. Okay. Well, that sucks. What are the odds it's in my What are the odds we can see France? No. Not get me France. Okay, well, we'll just go off what they were saying. One more. This is the total score. I'll have to find that another time. Get it. Basically, they're also having. So they're going through the same thing. And if you start taxing the young more, you're gonna turn a problem into a crisis, or you're gonna turn a crisis into a disaster.
They are already struggling with consistent brain drain. Immigration could fill in those skills gaps, but that's become increasingly unpopular, not only as a social flashpoint, but also as another economic trend that is arguably just kicking the can down the road. If the country can't tax more, can't responsibly take on more debt, can't supplement its labour force, and can't cut benefits, then it really is just destined to flip-flop between politicians who promise they have the magical cure to an impossible situation. Now, all of this is clearly true for France, but the thing is, it's also not unique to France. Almost every major developed economy in the world right now is dealing with basically the same set of unforgiving variables, but France seems to be taking it much harder than most.
Their pension systems and worker protection systems are just so much stronger that it's a force multiplier on
What makes this
happening.
even more interesting is that, comparatively speaking, France actually has a lot of things going for it over some of their peers, like a comparatively strong energy base and a diverse foundation of resilient-ish industries. There is also the logical paradox that must be addressed, that seemingly its ageing population is the root of all of its problems. We are told it just doesn't have enough young people to support those who are retiring, but yet its youth unemployment remains stubbornly and shockingly high. If France, and by extension other economies like it,
Chart. Let me see chart. Percentage of total labor forces. So France unemployment. Now, remember that unemployment it's difficult. It doesn't track proper unemployment. Like, it doesn't track underemployment. It doesn't track people that aren't looking for work. So almost all unemployment figures you see are an undercount. And how much of an undercount depends on how they calculate the unemployment. Sometimes it's a significant undercount.
hiring, but
And so when you see unemployment, percentage of total labor force 15 to 24 at 16.6%, like, sometimes you just change how you calculate unemployment to get unemployment to go down, rather than making jobs.
yet its youth unemployment remains stubbornly and shockingly high. If France, and by extension other economies like it, really are desperate for young workers to pick up the slack, why don't they start by hiring the ones they already have? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we need to, as always, answer a few important questions. What are the economic headwinds stalling the French economy? Why hasn't it been able to capitalise on the benefits it has over other economies? And finally, is the French economic situation really worse than any other advanced economy in the world right now? Or are they just better at making their grievances heard? Managing your money
That's going to be interesting.
isn't about chasing quick
Or is
wins.
that my
It's about
background
building
sound?
steady habits that grow over time. With Trading 212 app, you can invest commission-free in real stocks and ETFs, and even buy fractional shares, so you don't need thousands of euros to start building a diversified portfolio. They even offer 2.5% interest on your entire account just for holding in cash. I really like the Pies and Auto Invest function, which lets you set up your own diversified portfolio, automate monthly deposits, reinvest dividends, and even rebalance automatically. A feature usually reserved for big institutions. And if you're curious what other people are investing in, you can explore the Pi library and copy portfolios from categories like tech, green energy, or dividend investing. You can set up recurring investments, invest while you spend, or even try out everything with a practice account first. No risk, just learning. It's an incredibly simple way to turn good habits into long-term gains. Use the link in the description to download Trading 212 and you'll get a free fractional share worth up to €100 when you sign up. At the heart of the problem lies France's ageing demographic. More than 1 in 5 French citizens are now over the...
I mean, this is the heart of the problem for every Western country, and I mean, like China, South Korea, Japan, they all have this same problem.
The age of 65, roughly 15 million people. That is 22% of the population, more than double the global average, placing France among the world's oldest nations as a nation state and a living population. And the problem isn't temporary or slowing down. By 2070, nearly 30% of the country will be aged over 65 years old. Complicating the issue is, paradoxically, one of France's greatest social achievements: the country's high life expectancy of over 83 years. While this is good for the individual, it's not so good for solving the state's current conundrum. The very success of France's social safety in preserving the health of its citizens has now become a structural drag on the nation's economy. By 2030, 25% of the population is projected to be 65 and over, and the old are getting older. In the not-so-distant future, France will have as many people over the age of 75 as it has over the age of 65 today. And while only 10 years apart, the difference between a 65-year-old and a 75-year-old can be steep. One, on average, is still capable of light work and most can look after themselves. The same cannot be said for most 75-year-olds. The cold hard statistical reality is that as age increases, so does one's economic burden. The problem is, there is no immediate solution. The seeds of this demographic shift were planted decades ago, and as we all know, you simply can't turn back the clock. Now, of course, this aging demographic problem isn't unique to France. It's a common trend across the developed world. What is unique to France is that it has built arguably the most comprehensive social safety net in the world, the La Sécu. While this has created a remarkably egalitarian society, it comes with a price tag that the country simply cannot afford. Currently, France's public spending is the highest in the European Union.
So European Union, percentage of GDP, government spending to GDP. So we're looking at the average in the European Union. COVID, right? That's spiked. The percentage of GDP they spend. That's 50%-ish. France is up there. I mean, like, it's not that much higher.
Sitting at a staggering 57% of GDP, and this is compared to other European countries which generally have more government services than most already. Government spending in the USA, by comparison, accounts for only 38% of their GDP, almost a full 20% less.
Remember, they don't give health care to their people, right? Like, so if you spend less in your GDP on government services, that leaves more of the GDP to be spent elsewhere, like lower taxes so that your people can afford health care and stuff like that. Although, I mean, their healthcare systems, so their system is not, like, theoretically that's how it should work. Practically
less than France. Digging deeper, the weight of the social safety net becomes clear. Nearly 32% of France's entire GDP is exclusively devoted to social benefit spending. This is a massive annual bill that must be paid despite France's stagnating economic growth. So, where does the money to pay these bills come from? In theory, taxes. Unlike private pensions or 401ks where you save your own money and invest it for the future, the French social security system is what's known as pay-as-you-go. Today's workers are paying for today's retirees.
Ooh, like that. That system is going to cause so many problems. Because, like, you look at my generation, and you're paying for the current retirees, but when you look at the system, it doesn't look like it's gonna last. Like, it doesn't look like it's gonna stand the test of time. And so what is that gonna look like when my generation retires? I've got no idea. It's gonna look nothing like it does right now. I would far rather be paying into a system where when I pay the tax money, it's saved so that when I retire, the money I've made is used to pay my retirement, not the money I make used to pay the current retirees' retirement. There's a fundamental flaw in this system, and it's gonna catch big at some point, and it's gonna hurt a lot.
Therein lies the problem. This worked great in the 1960s and 70s when there were nearly 4 workers for every 1 retiree. But as the population continues to age, that rate...
Look at that. Employed people, pensioners in the general plan. Look at the percentage increase. So, are you looking at like a 1-to-1 in France right now?
Ratio has collapsed. Today, there are approximately 1.9 workers supporting every pensioner in France. And at current projections, the math only gets worse. France is at a crossroads and must make some difficult decisions to address their mounting problem. 2 seemingly obvious choices present themselves.
Okay. Two easy choices. Raise retirement age or reduce the amount you get for the retirement.
Option A, increase taxation on the current shrinking work.
Okay. Or make the unhappiness epidemic worse.
Force. Or option B, slashing benefits for current and future retirees. But things are never as simple as they seem, particularly in France. Let's talk option A, increase taxation. Seems like a...
You can't... The harder it is, the less you get from your labor, the less likely you are to seek out more labor. The higher you increase taxes, the higher the unemployment rate will be within the country. I can almost guarantee you there is a causal relationship between the unemployment rate and how much you charge them in taxes. So that's a slippery slope.
Plausible solution. But there is one major problem. France is running out of room to tax. Literally. France has consistently maintained the near highest tax to GDP ratio out of the 38 countries in the OECD.
Tax to GDP ratio. That's interesting. What is Canada's and the US's tax to GDP ratio? So, France, their tax to GDP is 43.5. Let's see what we get. Okay. Approximately 34.2 for Canada and approximately 27.5 for the United States. So the United States is the best because you want a lower number. You want to tax people less for GDP. Canada, slightly higher than that. And then tax to GDP ratio, these countries. I mean, despite saying that, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, these are some of the highest standard of living and like the highest on the happiness index as well. So the tax to GDP ratio I don't think means as much as what you do with the taxes you take.
At a whopping 44%. 44 out of every $100 generated in the French economy goes straight to the government, for better or worse. To support their massive social security system, France maintains one of the most aggressive tax systems in the world, with a progressive tax system that starts at 0% but quickly phases up to 45% for its highest earners. The tax system is a complicated web of income taxes combined with employee and employer social security contributions. The average individual worker in France pays roughly 20
employee social security rate, income tax rate. What is employee social security?
8% in taxes, but it is actually worse than that. On average, the total tax...
Let me see that chart again. Because income tax rate, measure gross wage earnings. So this is how much of the gross wage earnings is being taken between these two different types of taxes. United States. Okay.
The average individual worker in France pays roughly 28% in taxes, but it is actually worse than that. On average, the total tax burden for every single employee in France is 47%, which includes personal income taxes and social contribution taxes. France's social contribution taxes are shared between the employee and the employer. On average, beyond compensation, the employer pays an additional 45% of gross salary to the state in social contributions. This creates some of the highest labour costs in the world, stifling economic growth and leading into our next problem: youth unemployment.
Like if your employer is forced to pay an additional 45% to just the government, like that's absolutely a massively spike labor cost by 45%.
But first, let's talk option B, slashing benefits. Logically, if France cannot raise taxes on the current workforce...
you can slash benefits by reducing the amount you get or increasing the age in which you start to get them. Both will be wildly
corporations. The obvious alternative is to slash retirement benefits, either through reducing benefit payments or raising the age of retirement. However, that is easier said than done. Like most economics, this solution sounds logical in theory, but when economic policies are applied in the real world, outcomes are rarely as theory would suggest. The French are particularly protective of their hard-earned social safety net. To them, it is a hard-won right, the culmination of decades of collective bargaining and a fundamental contract between the citizen and the state. Slashing benefits is not a new concept to the French, and neither is protest. In fact, the French are quite fond of it and are exceptionally good at it. When politicians present Plan B, it isn't a parliamentary debate. It is more akin to a declaration of war that plays out in the streets. Most recently, in 2023, President Macron and his government proposed pension reform that would raise the age of retirement from 62 to 64 and...
What's our retirement age? I want to say 65? What's the retirement age in Canada and the US and the UK?
Increase the required years of work from 42 to 43.
Okay, so a slight increase in retirement age.
And increase the required years of work from 42 to 40.
And a slight increase in how many years you gotta work to get that. Okay, Canada, standard age 65. So we're early options. You can start as early as 60, but your monthly payment is permanently reduced. Oh, okay, but 65 is the default. You can't take this early. United States. For anyone reaching age 62 is now the F. Full retirement age is exactly 67. So they even got a higher retirement age than us. So France was at 62, looking to be 64. 65, Canada, 67 in the US, 66 in the UK. So France has a lower retirement age than all the other countries we just looked at. And even what they were looking to increase it to would still be lower.
43. Historically,
Then Canada, the US, and the UK.
the French have enjoyed one of the youngest retirement ages in the world, coupled with the fact that their life expectancy is among the highest in the EU, and it's plain to see that this has been a pretty good deal for the French citizenry. But, not shockingly, 62 is considered high in the standards of the French. Never mind the recently proposed age of 64. For much of the 1990s and 2000s, the average age of retirement in France was below 60 years of age. This changed in 2010 under then-President Nicolas Sarkozy. Unsurprisingly, the change was not welcomed and triggered massive populist unrest in the streets of France, with millions of citizens engaging in nationwide strikes and protests. Garbage piled up for weeks, and across the country, 1 in 4 fuel stations ran dry as protesters blockaded fuel depots. Despite the violent reaction, Sarkozy's government succeeded in pushing through the reforms, raising the minimum French retirement age to 62. All of that is to say that the stage was set for Macron's unpopular 2023 reforms, and the French reacted, well, as expected, with mass strikes and angry protests. Macron first attempted pension reform to no avail in 2019, resulting in the longest strikes in the nation's history. But this time, he was determined not to fail in spite of expected backlash. When it became clear that Macron and the Born government would not be able to pass the resolution through Parliament, Macron utilised the Constitution's controversial Article 49.3. Article 49.3 was introduced in 1958 by Charles de Gaulle as a last resort, yet essential tool to remedy the failings of the French Fourth Republic. A chaotic period of parliamentary divide which...
The Fourth Republic. They've gone through 4 already. How did the First, Second, and Third Republic end?
experienced a staggering 21 government changes.
Maybe this will be the end of the fourth if they try and push through the retirement age reform.
12 years. It aimed to increase political stability and expand government powers, a nuclear option to ensure that the state could function in spite of an overly fractured National Assembly unable to reach a consensus. The article is straightforward in nature, but is unnervingly undemocratic. It allows the Prime Minister to engage the responsibility of the government, to pass and adopt bills without parliamentary review. Recognising their bill would fail with a vote, Macron and then Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne invoked the article, effectively making their pension reforms law and pushing the age requirement to 64.
Ooh, so they did it? Is that the retirement age now? I guess we're going to
However, once enacted, a provision of the article allows for a vote of no confidence. 2 quickly followed, and failed. Parliament's hands were tied. The French people, though, would not accept the change so quietly. Polls suggest that nearly 80% of the population found the use of Article 49.3 as unjustified. As if on schedule, the French took to the streets in protest, eager for their voice to be heard. Once again, strikes ensued, vital industries shut down, and trash piled up. Macron's popularity followed suit, reaching one of the lowest approval ratings in modern French history. Now, as economists, we like to pretend we are generally above politics, but the reality is that even the best economic ideas need some administrative weight behind them if they are going to be implemented. As something of a common theme to be aware of, France has suffered from the need to make big policy.
Like, this place is beautiful. Who got to build a tall tower? Why did nobody else get to build a tall tower? Someone over here got to build a tall tower. But other than like these two, everything is just, what is that, like 4 or 5 stories only? What is this building? That building's cool. Okay.
Changes, often without the political will to actually make them. Nonetheless, Macron had delivered on his policy and his pension reforms were now law. Inevitably, life carries on. The protests gradually faded and the French returned to work.
Yep.
But while Macron had seemingly won the battle, he would soon find out that the war was far from over. Fast forward to 2025 and Macron's pension reforms are once again the topic of debate. But this time, the momentum has shifted. In 2024, Macron's Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, attempted to use the same tool as Macron and Borne had in 2023 to pass a social security budget which included tax increases and spending cuts in an effort to rein in France's spiralling deficit. As always, the use of the article provides for a vote of no...
I mean, like, you gotta be careful with that. You just do, as a country. Like, the US gets away with it because of the whole world reserve currency thing, but like, if they don't figure it out, it's gonna cause a lot of problems for them too.
No confidence, and this time it passed, succeeded for the first time since 1962, Prime Minister Michael Barnier's government had officially collapsed. Barnier did manage to succeed in one monumental regard, though, becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of the French Fifth Republic.
Look at that. Congratulations. Short 6 months. So what? He got like 2.5 months in office?
Lasting only 90 days.
No,
He was
3
replaced by Francois Bayrou, who, after battling a deadlocked parliament for 9 months, made the bold decision to call for a self-imposed vote of confidence in an attempt to push forward his austere budget. It backfired. He was ousted and, in doing so, became the first French Prime Minister in modern history to accomplish such a feat. France would be getting its 5th Prime
Oh, goodness. Like, that's... Who was it in the UK that was like, oh yeah, you put me in power and I'll call for a referendum on leaving the EU. And then he got put in power and then instantly was like, oh god, this is good. This is going to be terrible. And he just like peaced out. I want no part in this. I'm sorry I started this.
Minister in less than 2 years. Next up, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, who in refusing to be outdone by his predecessors, resigned in less than a month. But he was
Wait, so like... Oh my goodness.
appointed once again the following day. The political turmoil of the Fourth French Republic that Charles de Gaulle had hoped would remain firmly in the past is back again, with no signs of letting up. Back to today, and the war is not over.
But like... They have no power to fix it? Every time somebody comes in, it's like, okay, I'm gonna fix the deficit spending, and you're gone. All right, next person comes in, I'm gonna fix the deficit spending, and you're gone.
Quite the opposite, actually. Macron's
I mean, why don't you just run on spending more then? Or is that just what they always do? That's what got him into this situation.
hard-fought reforms are more in jeopardy than ever before. Entering 2026, Prime Minister Lecornu once again found himself in the all-too-familiar impossible bind. To avoid yet another government collapse, he suspended Macron's pension reforms. For now, the retirement age remains 62, and with it, hopes of deficit reforms are gone. At least until 2028, conveniently after the next election. The government has successfully avoided another no-confidence vote, but at a massive fiscal cost. Economists warn the delay will add billions to the deficit. Macron's approval rating has dropped to historic lows, and the people in Parliament are eager for change. The next president will be handed the same demographic time bomb, with predictably little appetite.
The same time bomb all round. The same deficit time bomb. Same... Oh.
For structural change. The proverbial can has once again successfully been kicked. The French
Just keep kicking the can. Keep kicking the can, and it's going to be somebody else's problem. Unfortunately, like if you're like, I'd say under 40, you're not just going to keep kicking the can. The can gets bigger each time you kick it, and at some point, it's going to break your foot.
people refuse to accept the future, and the French politicians find safety in the present. While convenient, the situation is untenable. Now, at the other end of the spectrum of France's ageing retirees are its youth. Remember the high labour costs we mentioned earlier? Well, this is where it shows up. France is desperate for workers to fund its retirees.
Youth unemployment. I love charts. I love how he uses charts. Youth unemployment rate in EU member states. Again, like, I don't think there's a consistent way that they calculate youth unemployment. But it's the best we got, right? What is youth unemployment in Canada, the US, and the UK? Is the UK up here? EU in general. I mean, that's a high unemployment rate.
Yet it has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the developed world. One important
What was the number? 18.5. US 8.5. Canada 13.8. What was... I mean, we're doing better than France, but that's still terrible. I mean, that's terrible. The United Kingdom, 15.8. Ouch. Ow.
Workers to fund its retirees, yet it has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the developed world. One important aspect of France's egalitarian culture is its robust protection of workers' rights. The French worker is typically well protected from discrimination, wrongful termination, and from being overworked. The standard work week in France is 35 hours, and
Ooh, that's nice. Like, 35 hours is better than here.
employees are afforded the right to disconnect, promoting healthy work-life balance. French employee-employer agreements typically fall into two categories.
Oh, that's a problem right there. Office emails, a lot of times for a lot of different positions, you're like always not really on call, but you're always like a part of the work culture. You can receive emails and have to deal with work stuff even in off-hour time. I guess that's kind of like being on call. And that's becoming far more common. It does a lot of it's incredibly stressful when you're always on call.
Right to disconnect, promoting healthy work-life balance.
I like that.
French employee-employer agreements typically fall into two categories: the CDI, or
but the more worker protections you put in place, the less competitive your labor market is going to be. And so you gotta balance those things.
contrat à durée indéterminée, and the CDD, contrat à durée déterminée, otherwise known as permanent and temporary contracts. The CDI is the standard open-ended permanent employment contract which offers maximum job security, paid benefits, and stability. In France, this is the default. In fact, employers must justify their use of a CDD or fixed-term contract. CDDs are typically used for seasonal employment, replacement of absent employees, or to fill temporary work for a specified task, and typically range from 1 to 18 months. In essence, if you have a CDI permanent job contract, you have the gold standard of benefits and are almost impossible to fire. As an employee,
that's not good. Like, companies need to be able to fire and restructure. Like, to be competitive, you need to be able to replace people with AI and then hire AI, people that work with AI to fill roles, for example. But this appears in a lot of areas where businesses change. Like, what you need from your employees change. If you can't get rid of an employee and they suddenly become less profitable to you, you have a problem. This prevents innovation.
This sounds great. As an employer, not so much.
Yeah.
The CDI has created unintended consequences for the French economy that are particularly acute in the current crisis. Remember, on top of salary, employers must pay the government an additional 45% of gross wages in social contributions.
Social security rate for companies. So this is additional money that has to be paid. Canada's at 8.3. France is at 45.
The cost of hiring an employee in France is akin to hiring 1.5 elsewhere. For comparison, employer social security taxes in the United States are 6.2%. So, hiring new employees is too costly and getting rid of bad ones is near impossible. As a result, businesses have clammed up. This has created a two-tiered system in France, those with permanent positions and those without. On one side, you have an older, skilled workforce secure in their employment, and on the other, you have the youth. Young people in France with little to no qualifications are being hired into temporary roles and receiving little to no training. The contract ends and workers are left unemployed, no closer to securing permanent employment than when they started. They are ever increasingly being trapped in a self-reinforcing cycle of temporary work. The problem is only getting worse. CDIs or permanent
what do you do when that just becomes the norm, right?
roles account for approximately 85% of total employment in France. The other 15% fall into the temporary category. But an alarming trend is emerging. Permanent positions, well, by nature, remain permanent, with less turnover and less hiring. Temporary employment, however, has been undergoing a structural shift. Over the last 2 decades, the share of new hires falling into the category of fixed-term contracts lasting less than 1 month in length has increased from slightly under 50% to nearly 70%. And in France, the odds of transitioning from a temporary contract to a permanent position is extremely low, somewhere between 10 and 20%. The same laws that are meant to protect workers in France are preventing them from being hired into meaningful employment. One solution for a labour shortage seems obvious.
Yep, your worker protections are so high, companies do everything possible to not bring a worker on full time because of the negatives it brings the company. Like, of course this is going to happen, and of course this is going to continue to expand unless, like,
Yes.
change
Immigration.
it with law.
The problem is, many of those eager to immigrate are unskilled workers, falling into the same trap as France's forgotten youth. The results of this rigid two-tiered system of insiders and outsiders is a forgotten generation of young people that feel like guests in their nation's economy, yet they are being asked and relied upon to pay for the benefits of a system in which they may never participate in. High costs of labour are locking the unskilled out of the workforce, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have the country's highly educated and highly skilled. Well, they are not locked out. In fact, they are in high demand, yet they are not participating. They are fleeing. This is the French brain drain. Every year, thousands of...
This happens in a lot of places. Canada has this problem too. Generally, the US offers higher wages for most post-secondary graduate study work. And so you have a big issue with people leaving Canada to go work in the US where it's more competitive.
French engineers, doctors and business graduates move to Switzerland, Britain and the United States in search of less taxes and more money. When your economic growth is stagnating, having your most productive citizens flee to greener pastures is not what you want. A shrinking skilled workforce, no room to raise taxes and no appetite for cutting benefits has left France...
This is France, right? Like, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stories tall. I mean, what you can tell from just a country's architecture, infrastructure.
No appetite
right?
for cutting benefits has left France with only one solution. France has been forced to rely on debt to make the math work. For a long time, this seemed like the easy way out, but the bills are due and the proverbial bank may be closing. How did they manage to get here? Well, quite frankly, pun intended, it was initially out of necessity. France's spiral into debt began in the aftermath of 2008, when the collapse of the US housing market triggered a financial crisis that spilled beyond its borders and into overexposed French and European banks. Despite the policies of austerity by its European neighbours, France borrowed from the playbook of the United States, leaning into a debt-fueled stimulus plan to support recovery. It seemingly worked, but instead of tightening its belt post-crisis like many other European countries...
That's the problem, right? Like, debt is an instrument that can... it can trigger, like, you can increase public spending, you can create, like, growth and stabilize the economy and essentially charge the economy. But if you don't bring the deficit spending back under control, debt, accumulated debt acts like a blanket on an economy, forcing it down, preventing further growth. And the bigger the debt, the heavier the blanket. And so if you don't get rid of the blanket in the good times, then the next time there's a crisis or shock, you have the added weight of the blanket with the shock, and it's going to make it worse. You got to spend more debt and then make the blanket heavier. This is, you kick the can down the road and the can gets bigger. You kick the can down the road and the can gets bigger. Eventually you just can't kick the can down the road anymore. And that is when you have a real problem.
France developed a taste for borrowing, drawn in by a decade of near zero interest rates. After all, the money...
That is when you get a Greece problem.
...was basically free until it wasn't. Cue the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to avoid the economic and social catastrophe of the lockdown, France once again turned to the free money printing presses in a massive...
Like, I think Greece They work like a 6-day work week now. Oh, okay. What else do we got? Go back chat. Let's try. Is the 6-day work week a common thing in Greece today? How many hours on average does someone work in Greece? Okay.
Whatever it takes response to the pandemic, France's debt to GDP had reached an unprecedented 115%, nearly doubling since those good old days before 2008, and it has only gone up since. But as we all know all too well,
I mean, remember, it was like 104 was their net debt to GDP, and that's a much better. No, a 6-day work week is not common in Greece today. It is a limited optional for employers in specific sectors. Policy introduced in 2024, not the standard for most workers. Okay. Details of the 6-day work week. In July 2024, Greece implemented a law allowing certain private sector businesses, mainly those open 24/7, to require or offer a 6-day of work. Standards remains 5-day, 40 hours. The 6-day, 8 hours is paid at 40% overtime premium. Does not apply universally. Targeted at sectors with labor shortages or high demand. I mean, from my standing, a lot of sectors are experiencing labor shortages because of this push. A lot of their workers have left, right? Just like in France, you can see people moving from place to place for work, and you don't offer good worker protection, good pay, and good work-life balance, they just leave. Greece has one of the longest average working weeks in the EU, though actual figures are below a full 6-day schedule. For most people, 39.8 hours per week, the highest in the EU. The average is 36 hours. For men in full-time roles, often around 42. I mean, like, 40-hour work week is what's common here. My understanding. So if Greece is 39.6 hours, which I mean, it's longer than the rest of the EU. What are the hours per week worked average for Canada, US, and UK?
well, today, one of the unfortunate side effects of massive stimulus spending is inflation. And like most of the world, France was not spared.
French consumer price inflation.
The stimulus spending is...
I mean, you look at Canada and we have that same massive spike. I don't know if it goes as high, but this inflation spike here, COVID inflation, like it's done damage to every economy. United States, 36 to 38. Okay. Canada, 32 to 34. Part-time work and standard schedules. United Kingdom, 31 to 35. Okay. I guess this is average, right? And so if you have more part-time workers, so they're actually all lower than Greece. But I mean, Greece went through financial collapse.
Is inflation. And like most of the world, France was not spared. France's free money party was officially over, but it was too late. As the ECB raised rates to combat inflation, the cost of refinancing the debt has skyrocketed. Today, France is spending as much on interest payments as it is on defence, and the problem is compounding. Ideally, a country can grow its way out of debt. But France's economic growth is stagnating, not increasing. The country's primary moneymakers, luxury goods and tourism, are both facing headwinds and are unable to fuel the growth France is in desperate need of. That leaves the world to wonder, is France on a fast track to become the next Greece? While France hasn't quite reached the debt to GDP ratios of the Greek crisis, they are closing in.
So the Greek crisis was at 210.
In fact, French bond yields have surpassed those of Greece. Yikes. This is more than a psychological blow. It is a signal that investors are fleeing. But this time, it isn't a periphery country.
I mean, that's just a beautiful place.
In the Eurozone. This time, it is the second largest economy on the continent. A Greek-style crisis in France would prove catastrophic. France isn't alone in its debt problems or its demographic problems. Many of the major economies of the developed world share similar woes. Look at the United States. They have a higher debt to GDP ratio and a larger deficit spending. What then is so different? Well, a few things. For one, the US economy is growing faster and has been, while France is stagnating. Secondly, and more significantly, the United States has the privilege of being the world's reserve currency, and with it, the ability to almost endlessly borrow debt and attract investment. Unless they were to do something crazy to mess that up.
I mean, like, I wouldn't put it past them.
Hypothetically. France, on the other hand, belongs to the Eurozone and is beholden to the Stability and Growth Pact, which, in theory, mandates a debt to be below 60% of GDP and a 3% deficit limit. France is well beyond those limits and has caught the ire of Brussels. The EU has enacted its excessive deficit procedure, mandating that the country end its excessive deficit by 2029.
Oh yeah, like, the EU is another whole organization that makes this a mess, because the euro isn't French specific. Having control of your own currency gives you so much more control in terms of deficit spending than having a currency like the euro, which is shared between a group of nations. I mean, I bet you the EU is trying to clamp down on this spending.
Or face penalties including fines and sanctions. The problem is, meeting these requirements means pivoting to austerity. And as we've already discussed, the French citizens are not fans of austerity and the politicians have no appetite for it. The only way out seems to be growth. While the world has raced full speed into the AI revolution, it faces a major hurdle: a lack of energy to power its massive data centres. Fortunately for France, it has the largest nuclear energy base in Europe. It is uniquely positioned to power the innovation of tomorrow. But unfortunately for France, that requires tens of billions in investment and, well, they simply do not have the money nor the borrowing capacity to take advantage.
Ooh.
They are stuck between a rock and a hard place. What small growth the economy has is fueled by government spending that it cannot afford, and the time for borrowing may be running out. They are staring at a wall of EU-imposed austerity if they cannot get their fiscal house in order, but to do so risks civil unrest or taxation that slows down growth. France finds itself in a complex situation with no easy solutions. But something...
And they keep going through leaders. Like it's going out of style.
Or someone's got to give. Will it be the workers, the retirees, the politicians, or the nation's economy? Now, if you want to see France's predicament in the context...
Okay, really good. I enjoyed that. It looks like France is gonna have some... Oh, what's this? This is something terrible is happening in France.
Text of Europe's wider struggles at the moment, we have actually...
I mean, like, these problems can be solved. Like, pretty much all economic problems can be solved. You need the political will to do it. And I'm not sure they're gonna get it until they're forced to. And like, what's gonna happen? Like, if the EU tries to force France to control its deficit spending, does France try to leave the EU? I mean, we already know what happens when deficit spending gets too high, like it did in Greece. You go through an economic catastrophe, gonna